Hello, dear ones. I am coming to you from the Society of Biblical Literature National Annual Meeting. It's the biggest conference of biblical scholars in the world. Many thousands of biblical scholars gather each weekend before Thanksgiving in some major U.S. city. This year it's in Boston, to essentially talk about the Bible, all that's new and great. I wanted to mention that last night I saw a very warm and winning example of biblical interpretation from a major biblical scholar that I wanted to share with you. Just because I was so taken by it and I thought it was worth sharing. That scholar is Ellen Davis of Duke University. She's been at Duke for a very long time, and one of her specialties is landscape criticism, reading the Bible through the lens of landscape, and also agriculture criticism or Bible and ecology, thinking about the Bible in terms of the land in which we live. She began her presentation, which was at the Institute for Biblical Research, the IBR Institute. Yeah, I think that's what it is, IBR. About 1,000 people in attendance, really great environment. She began by noting an interaction she'd had with Wendell Berry's daughter, Wendell Berry being one of the prominent Christian writers about agriculture and farmers and land, in which, and I think her name was Mary Berry, is that right? Could that be right? I'm just gonna call her Wendell Berry's daughter, had noted to Ellen Davis that in fact, in the particular county in which they were in, this was in like Kentucky or Tennessee or something, there were 56 churches, and to their knowledge, not one of those churches had any kind of specific focus or ministry to one of the main professions of people who actually live in that place, namely farmers. And Ellen Davis used this as a bridge to talk about the way that we either pay attention to or fail to pay attention to the actual physical geographies and landscape and people who are around us. And she began by making this point: we have to let our place act on us first. That is primary. We come somewhere and we are shaped by a place. Not that we come into a place and impose an agenda on a place, a one-size-fits-all program for how I'm going to change a place, whether that's an institution or a church or a family or even a landscape for that matter. But rather our place must first act on us, in a sense tell us who we are, and then from that base we can go and act. She made the argument that what we really need to do is engage with the wilderness of our place, wherever we are, and every place, she contended, has a wilderness. And she drew this idea from an older essay by Wendell Berry. I'll put a couple of links down below to Ellen Davis and Wendell Berry and some of these ideas if you want to check it out. Got to get into the wilderness of our place. And in the biblical tradition to which she then turned, particularly in the Psalms and really all over the place, the wilderness is a place, as you know, of growth and refinement and testing. We only become ourselves through an encounter with the wilderness. If we fail to grow, and if we fail to learn, or if we fail to change based on that encounter with wilderness, the wilderness becomes a place, in the biblical tradition at least, of dying. Right? Israel in the book of Numbers. She also brought up this idea with reference to Psalm 23, and her main focus was on the Psalms, this idea of a path versus a road. And there's a different biblical lexicography for paths and roads. And she brought up this particular biblical Hebrew phrase. You can look it up. Maybe I'll put a link down below if I can, to this phrase that actually occurs in Psalm 23. You lead me in the paths of righteousness. And really the phrase there only occurs a couple times in the Psalms, but it refers to wagon paths. And you lead me in the wagon paths of righteousness. And she brought this up to make a contrast, I guess, to the idea of a road, the way we think of a road in an industrialized place. A road is somewhere that gets you somewhere. It goes from point A to point B. It might go through a tunnel or cut through a mountain, or you might have to cut trees down or something like that. But she brought up this idea of the path being something that conforms to the shape of the land, and asked us to think about the extent to which we're following paths or roads in our lives. I thought that was really provocative to think about. This was a presentation, by the way, which was not just like purely secular biblical scholarship, but was, of course, inflected everywhere with Christian theology and with spiritual meaning, okay, in case you haven't figured that out. She asked us also not just to think about wagon paths in Psalm 23 and the way that food and agricultural products get from one place to another in our world today, But she asked us to think really about all of the nature, quote, metaphors as maybe not being metaphors. If you look up some of the terms in the Psalms for nature imagery, she points out, like in Brown Driver Briggs, BDB, the main Hebrew dictionary, you'll find they say things like, oh, this is spiritual or figurative language for. She said, why is it figurative language? Why are we so quick to spiritualize? I mean, many of us have gotten great spiritual benefits from spiritualizing these kinds of languages, this kind of language of sheep and of pastures and of wagon paths and of tables and all these kinds of things. But she says, why spiritualize it? Why not take it literally? You prepare a table before me, a shulchan in Hebrew. Maybe we should think about the shulchan literally, the kinds of tables that we actually do inhabit with other kinds of people in our lives and with whom we are sharing actual meals in actual places, whether we want to or not. Maybe these are people in our families, maybe these are other kinds of people too. So not just spiritual, but literal. And she ended more or less by talking about Psalm 36, pointing out one of the major images there, which she called maybe one of the most inclusive ecological visions of salvation in all of the Bible. Particularly Psalm 36:6, which says something like, and I'm paraphrasing, "You, O Lord, save both people and animals. Both people and animals are saved by the Lord." So really, rather than making one kind of point or trying to get all into some kind of ecological message that we all must believe, she asked us to pay attention to just the words of the Bible itself with regard to these natural images, to see how prevalent they are, and to think seriously about the way that we interact with our natural world, with our place in that world, not just our spiritual place, not just our intellectual place, our actual physical place and the landscapes we inhabit. And this is one really powerful way of interpreting the Bible, through landscape, through agriculture, through ecology.